So the first question here requires us to, we have division with exception handling, all right? So we are supposed to create a program that takes two numbers from the user and perform a division operation, okay? Then implement exception handling to handle division by zero and invalid inputs, okay? So even before we start thinking of exception handling, let's do it the way we would have done even before we covered that topic. Okay, so we have, say, I'll have the first number, or let me have num1. Okay, then I have num2 here, and I'll do. All right, so again, these two numbers in here, we have two candidates. All right, so the first one thinks that the numbers coming in must be integers. All right, so again, in case somebody is dividing, say, 20.5 divided by 5, then we might lose some value. All right, so the best way, instead of using casting whatever input that comes into integer, we at least need to use a float. At least we are aware a float will simply add a dot zero to a number that is not a float, but it will not lose a value. All right, I hope that makes sense why we need to use float here and not an integer, unless we explicitly advise the users that we only want to work with integers. All right, then in here we need answer, which again is num1 divided by num2. Okay, then we can proceed and print answer. Okay, so for now, let's try that out. Do that, enter numerator. Okay, I usually prefer having that. So enter, the first one is 10, second one is 4. All right, so we get that the division has happened. Again, if we try to have 4, 0, so our program will crash, and that is where we need to handle these errors accordingly. All right, and the way to do that, we need to have a try block there. So it should try to execute whatever we have under this block. Then the first exception that we need to have in mind is the zero division error, because remember, okay, let me just have it back here and show you something. We have already seen the zero division error. Okay, then remember, users will try to mock around with their system. So enter a numerator, they will enter some strings. Okay, so again, see, if you try to enter some strings, the system will try to convert that to a float. Remember, the string is not a problem, but the system is trying to convert this string to a float, but then it says not practical, so that's why we get a value error. So look, could not convert string to float. Okay, so we need to have all that in mind. All right, so in that case, we need to handle one, the zero division error. So except zero division error, so we can talk about as e, no harm, or even leave it out, because whatever we have down here is what will advise the user what is happening. So we can have f, then mention error, and we can have e. Okay, or even have your own custom error. All right, so that is one of them. Then we can also have the second one here. So just below the first exception here, you can also have as many exceptions as possible down here, depending with the number of errors that you think your application might encounter. Okay, so again, we have the value error as e. Okay, then we need to print. So let me just copy and paste what we have here, because it is the same. Okay, So let's try to execute our program again. 4, 2, that's okay. 5, 0, okay. So see, fruit division by 0. So these again might not really advise the user so nicely. So you can always use a custom message here. For instance, instead of having what you have here, let me just delete everything and have, we we can't have 0 as the denominator and all that. Please try again now, whichever message that you want to pass across to your users. Okay, so let me try to enter some strings here. Okay, so could not convert the string to float. All right, so that's simply how to approach that question. The second question here requires us to, we are supposed to do file handling with exception. All right, then we are supposed to develop a script that reads a file and handles the file not found error exception by providing a user-friendly message. All right, so this we are going to see in our probably our next topic, whereby we are going to talk about using Python to read the content of a file. But no harm, let's mention that here. Okay, so remember, whenever you are building a program that requires you to use a try and except block, the template remains the same. So you have something here, then you have except, probably mention the name of the error that you expect to get. So in the try block, we are going to do this. Don't worry, we are going to cover this in our next topic. So we have with open. Okay, then in here you need to mention the name of the file that you want to read. All right. So for now, let me talk about requirements dot txt. Okay, so we want to read the content of this file. Okay, so we have requirements.txt, and in here we need to mention the mode. For now, we are going to make use of the R mode, that is simply to read the content of that file. So we are going to have with open the name of the file, then mention the mode, then as file. Okay, remember how we have been doing, import a library as. Okay, so in this case we make use of as file, then we can assign that to content, and we talk about file, whatever we just mentioned here, dot, we just want to read the content of that file. Then we can simply print the content, we can simply print the content of that file there. Okay, so it is not always that this file must exist. Okay, and that's where the exception class comes in, where we need to talk about file not found error. All right, so if it is not found, then we can simply print the file is not found. Okay, or any other custom error. You don't want to keep your users thinking about what you mean, so just ensure that the message here is as clear as possible. All right, so let's see. So to execute the program, okay, so see, we have been able to read through the content of this file. All right, in case that file doesn't exist, let me remove an S there. So we already know that requirement.txt file does not exist. What we have is requirements with an S. So in case I execute my program here, see, the file is not found. All right, so let's move on to the next question here. So in here, we are supposed to build a simple calculator application that can perform basic arithmetic operations, that is addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, implement error handling for invalid inputs, and division by 0. All right. All right. So let's see what is expected of us here. So we can talk about num1. Okay. Then let's also have num2. Okay. So again, in here we can decide to convert everything to an integer. But remember, converting a number to an integer, if it had a decimal place, then that means the value from that point will be lost. All right, so let's make use of float. Also in here, we need to get, let me talk about operator. So in this case, we have plus, minus, we have a division, or multiplication. All right, I think there is a typo here. Operation. All right, so we get the first number, enter an operation, the second number. Okay, then in here we can make use of we can loop through what we have, and we are going to check if operator is equals to so let's start with plus. So what should happen? So it should print. Let's format that. Then we have num1 plus num2 is equals to num1 plus num2. All right, then again, so in here we need to make use of the elif statement, so whereby we talk about elif operator is equals to minus. We need to print this. Let me add some spacing here. Okay, so in here we have minus, then we can also have minus here. Again, let's talk about elif operator is equals to multiplication. Then so again, in that case, we can talk about else. Have that, and so anything apart from what we have here, when it comes to the operator, then that means that's an invalid input. Okay, so let's have that invalid input. All right, so remember, for now we haven't utilized the error handling technique. Okay, so let's try and see. Do that. First number 2. So the operation, let me talk about plus. Enter the second number 3. I get 2 plus 3 is equals to 5. So for the operation, I need to do something here. Okay. All right. So let me execute my program again, then ensure that I create some problem here. So okay, let me talk about, okay, then second number. All right, invalid input. Okay, that's okay, that is being handled here. All right, then let me execute it again. Enter the first number. I want division. I want to divide that by 0. All right, in that case we need to make use of our try and except block. So let's have try. Then I have that. Okay, then I'll have except. Then let's talk about zero division error, and mention that let me just print. Let me talk about num2 cannot be a 0. All right, or just any other custom message. All right, so the next thing is that the user might decide, instead of having a number here that is an integer or a float, they can decide to make use of some strings. Okay, and of course not all strings are convertible to either an integer or a float. So again, we also need to handle that except. So this will be a value error. Okay, then we can simply print invalid input. All right, so don't worry, whenever we don't make use of the say except value as e, so we mainly do that when we want to kind of reuse that e here. enter a number, high, invalid input. All right, try to execute that again. Enter a number. I want 5. Operation, I want minus. Okay, and then 2. All right, so see, we have 5 minus 2 is equals to 3. All right, so I believe our calculator is now complete. Let's move on to this next question here. Input validation with exception handling, whereby we need to do a program that validates user input. That is for, okay, this is just an example of the age, email, and laces a custom exception for invalid input. All right, so we can think of a simple application that will be taking in the age and the email or any one of them. Okay, so at least you need to appreciate, say, what an email should look like. Okay, because say an email is a special type of string. We are going to see that. All right, so now that we are talking about custom classes, let's define, and we want to define for now 2 classes. We are going to validate the age and email. Okay, so let's talk about class invalid email, error. Okay, so in here we can pass in exception. For now, I'll just talk about pass. All right, then let me also define the class to handle the age. So let's have the invalid age error. Okay, exception, and then we just have pass. That's good enough. Okay, then we need to define a function. All right, so we have a function that will accept some 2 parameters. Okay, so let's talk about validate user. All right, and then we are going to pass in the age and the email. All right, of course, remember this approach, especially in this case, it might slightly be different, but the end goal should remain the same. That is the way to validate. So I have chosen the function way, whereby I'll need to pass in the age and the email through a function, and it will go through the blocks of code that we are defining here. And in case any of them does not meet whatever conditions that we define here, we are going to get an error. All right, so again, let's see. So for the age, that's here to define the age. 1, at least the age should be greater than 0. We don't expect to have somebody with a negative age. Okay, then again, this age should be a number. All right, should be a number or an integer. All right, so with these 2 in mind, then we can proceed and do the validation of the age. Okay, so in here we can check if whatever age that comes in, so we can try to do if age, remember this age can come in as a string, so we can talk about if, try to do integer age is so we are checking for errors. All right, so we want to check if age is less than 0. All right, basically if this comes in as a string, then we know that this will not happen. All right, so we are not able to convert whatever age that comes in to an integer. So I believe that check for now is enough. That should be invalid age. So we are going to raise, let's talk about invalid age error. Then let's talk about invalid age entered. All right, then we also need to do a check independently of what we have here. So let's have if. So let's now think about an email. We have our email here, admin at All right. So, and even if you have a Gmail, usually we expect to have an @ all right. We usually expect to have an @ we also expect to have a dot. Okay, in this case we can check if these two do not exist. So these two must exist for whatever input that we have to qualify as an email. Okay, so we talk of if, then we talk about @ not in email. So this statement simply checks if @ is not in this email. Okay, because we are on the checkout of invalid email. Okay, and we are also in the lookout of this dot and dot not in email. Then we proceed and raise an exception, invalid email. All right. So in here, I want to do a slight adjustment. Okay, because for this to be an invalid email, in case any one of these is not here, then it is an invalid email. Okay, note that in case the two of them, that's the only time that this is an invalid email. If any of them misses, this is an invalid email. So instead of and, we still need to make use of the or operator here. So once we define that, then we can proceed and call the function. So we are going to try. And of course, you are not only limited to 2 or 1 check. In case there are also some other checks, then you should be able to do the checks here. Okay, so we are going to try. Then we call validate. We want to validate the user. In here, we can pass in the email and the age that we want to subject to the test. Then we talk about except. So in here, we have two exceptions that we are testing. So we can talk about invalid email error, okay, SE. All right, then we can print error and do that. All right, then let's also accept invalid age as E and have that as well. All right, so let's proceed and have something here. So the parameters, one, we need to pass in the age. So let's for now pass in some age that is in order. All right, so that's the age. Then for the email, email.com, we have user at email.com. So let's proceed and see. Okay, we don't get an error, we don't get anything. So validate. So what happens? So I can just talk of if age and email. So let me try this. Then print f. Then I can have email here and the age. Let me see how this one works. Not sure if that works well, right? So again, if that's correct, then this will be executed. Let's try to create some chaos here. I can have, let me just have -1, the age. All right, so that's an invalid age that has been entered. Again, I can have 1, but then we don't have a dot there. Let's test it again. All right, invalid email. We try something out here in the exception when calling the exception here. Let's accept and we capture the two errors. That is, we can have invalid age, comma, and we have invalid email. All right, then we capture that as E. Okay, then instead of having these two blocks here, we just have one block and do this. Let us see if this works in our favor. Invalid email, simply because okay, invalid email. How about if we have -1 here? Invalid age. All right, I have a dot. Do that. Invalid email user at. There is an at. All right, so in case you enter the two of them without errors, then you get an output of that. Okay. All right, so on to the last question here. Handling multiple exceptions. Write a program that handles multiple exceptions. All right, so okay, so let's see what we can have in this. So see, we want to divide some two numbers and we want these numbers to come from the user. Okay, so we need to get the input from the user. So let's just talk about number is equals to, we try to cast that to an integer. Okay, then have the input, then we have enter a number. All right, then let's do a try block here, because we are expecting to have some multiple errors. Then we can talk about answer being, so let's try to divide, say 20 by whatever number that comes in. All right, because remember, the goal of this question is to showcase how you can handle multiple exceptions. All right, so in here we accept. I've already demonstrated in our previous example how you can have the same in a single line. So we can have the value error, the type error, and zero divisor error. All right, as E. Okay, then proceed to print. We can print error and have E. Okay, so again, I think this is good enough. So we proceed and do that, and we can print the answer. Okay, so of course, all these errors, we will get them probably one by one. Let's try and see. So enter a number, we have a 0. Okay, I need to do this because this E comes from what we have here. I have 0. That's a division by 0. That's a 0 divisor error. Try again, talk about high. Okay, so in here, again, we are trying to convert a string to an integer. Again, we get an error. Then how about the other error? The other error we get by trying to do what? Let me refer here. Okay, so that's a value error. Then we have the 0 division error. We have already seen that. And of course, the type error again. So we may not directly get the type error here because initially the program will try to convert whatever input to an integer. Okay, and that is where we are going to get this value error even before the division happens. All right, so again, this is simply what was expected of us in that question.